The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
While some people were speaking about how the temple was adorned with costly stones and votive offerings, Jesus said, "All that you see here, the days will come when there will not be left a stone upon another stone that will not be thrown down." And then they asked him, "Teacher, when will this happen? And what sign will there be when all these things are about to happen?" He answered, "See that you not be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and 'the time has come.' Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for such things must happen first, but it will not immediately be the end." Then he said to them, "Nations will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be powerful earthquakes, famines, and plagues from place to place, and awesome sights and mighty signs will come from the sky. Before all this happens, however, they will seize and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and to prisons, and they will have you led before kings and governors because of my name. It will lead to your giving testimony. Remember, you are not to prepare your defense beforehand, for I myself shall give you a wisdom in speaking, that all your adversaries will be powerless to resist or refute. You will even be handed over by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair on your head will be destroyed. By your perseverance, you will secure your lives." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
In the past couple of weeks, I've been visiting the children in faith formation, and I've been asking the children in faith formation, I have some good news and bad news. Which do you want to hear first? And all the kids, of course, said, "We want to hear the bad news." Right. Kids said, "I want to hear the bad news first." Okay, let's hear the bad news. So I said, "Here it is. Ready? Okay, so I said, the bad news is that my dog Maxie is moving. Yes, I told him my dog Maxie is moving to another parish, Nativity Parish in Longwood, about 25 minutes away from here. It'll be effective December 1st. She's moving, and I'm going with her. I told her the bad news, broke the bad news, and they were very sad. I told them I was very sad too, because I love them. I told them I love being their priest, I love being their pastor, I love praying with them, I love playing with them, I love teaching them, I love celebrating the sacraments, I love doing First Communion, reconciliation, hearing the confession. I love all those things, and I'm going to miss that. So that's bad. So that's the bad news. There's good news, I told them. Don't worry, there's good news. Father Glenn is staying. He's not going anywhere. He's a wonderful priest. Father Josh Swallows is coming to take my place. Father Josh is a wonderful priest, and you'll get to know him and how much he loves you too. And finally, above all, I said the good news is God is leading us. God is leading us. But I'll get back to that. Same question to you today. What do you want to hear first, the good news or the bad news? And the gospel gives us both. What do you want to hear first, the good news or the bad news? You want to hear? Everyone want to hear the bad news? Look up here. Okay, the eyes have it. Sorry. You got to have fun with it, because the news is bad. The news is bad. Jesus in the temple area talking about this beautiful temple being destroyed. That is bad news. The news in our own day is bad. The practice of faith is on the decline. I mean, just look around, all the empty seats. I mean, who's not here? Our children are not here. Our grandchildren are not even baptized. The largest group in the country, religious group, is the non-religious, the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, who no longer are affiliated with any church or any religion. In fact, in different religions, sometimes hostile to religion. They have no use for religion. They have other options and things to do on Sunday morning. The nuns are greater than the evangelical Christians and the Catholics, and they're growing greater and greater in number. So the practice of faith is on decline. This is bad news. Bad news. And for those who do practice of faith, persecution. And Jesus said in the gospel, they will imprison you. They will bring you before the governors and kings and rulers, and you will be put to death. You will be persecuted. And he's speaking to his own day, but that's true as our own day. That in the 20th century, there was more people, Christians, martyred in the 20th century than all 19 centuries previous. And the 21st century is even worse. We're on our way to be even worse. We are persecuted. In our own country, we don't face death, but still. When you stand up with the Pope and bishops for immigrants, you'll be told you're liberal or naive or misguided, and we must enforce our laws. Or if you stand up with the Pope and bishops for the unborn children, you'll be told that you're a conservative, you're an oppressor. And it's in the Constitution, a right of privacy and choice. We must enforce our laws, you'll hear. You'll be called names. Social media will scapegoat you and bully and troll you. And there's persecution. Again, not putting us to death, but still, the practice of faith in a decline, the news is bad. Jesus said, as sure as there's earthquakes and storms and famines and plagues and war and violence and insurrections and suffering, there'll be bad news for my followers. When you follow me, the news will be bad. Plan on it. Plan on it. Okay, you say, Father Dave, enough of bad news. Let's hear the good news. Because there is bad news, there's good news, right? Good news, here. So you keep listening. And what happens next, if you listen to the gospel story, Jesus, after telling all this bad news about the temple and the persecution that was happening, then what happens next? It gets worse. Jesus gets arrested within days of this telling him. He gets arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's brought before this trial that's a sham. He is tortured. He is beaten. He is crowned with thorns. He carries his cross to Calvary. He is nailed to the cross with his hands and his feet, and he dies. The news could not be any worse. Bad news. But if you stop there, that's it. That's the end. There's nothing to live for. Why bother if you stop there? But we know that is not the end. And knowing the real ending makes all the difference. It's like this. All those TV shows, detective TV shows like Law and Order, bum bum, or NCIS, where there's all these detectives, finding these clues, and it begins with bad news. Someone gets murdered, someone gets abducted, something blows up. There's bad news. And then they go about trying to figure out what happened, who did this, how can we bring them to justice? And so the whole show goes forward until the very end. There's always that big reveal, the denouement, where all is made clear. Who did what, the great encounter between good and evil. They're brought to justice. There's a confrontation, and the final judgment is laid on them. And what we thought was to be dead ends, or you realize this was an important clue, or something that I thought was really obvious, you realize this was not important at all. Knowing the ending makes sense of everything that came before. We know the ending. We know the bad news, but we also know the ending. Christ is risen. Christ is risen. So to the world, what looks like the cross, we see glory. And to the world that looks like only bad news, we see salvation. Where the world only sees darkness, we see light. Light of Christ. His truth. His goodness. Shining. This is the good news. And knowing the ending, that Christ comes to rule the earth with justice, that he will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. This is the ending. That God has won the victory over the cross and is bringing it to fulfillment in Jesus Christ. We know how it'll end. All else is working toward that end in the hands of God. Knowing the ending makes all the difference. So I'm moving to another parish. It's an ending of sorts. But again, we know the real ending. We know God is leading us there. So what happened was the bishop spoke to me out of the blue, and he asked me to become the pastor of this parish, Nativity Parish. Nativity Parish in Longwood, the pastor there, Father Augustine Clark, was retiring. And he'd been trying to retire since the summer and waiting for the bishop to send a replacement. And when months went by and nothing happened. And so the bishop asked me to consider this. And I said, Bishop, give me some time to think about this. Take it to prayer. And he says, okay. And so that afternoon I called up Father Augustine to come visit and find out more. What's involved here? And he said, funny you should call. This very morning, at daily Mass, the regular daily Mass at Nativity Parish, Father Augustine celebrated a special Mass, the Mass of the Holy Spirit. And he told the people there at daily Mass, he says, let's pray that the bishop sends us a pastor so I can retire. And lo and behold, hours later, I call up out of the blue and say, let's talk. It's a true story. And this gives me confidence. This gives me peace that God is leading me and God is leading you. The same God who led Jesus through his passion and death on the cross to the glory of the resurrection, the same God is leading Most Precious Blood Parish here and now. The same God who established this parish 14 years ago, the same God who led me here for the past 6 years, is leading us here and now. He's leading Most Precious Blood to grow deep, reach wide, share blessings, seek unity. He's leading this parish to be a field hospital, as Pope Francis said, for the suffering, the hurting. He's leading Most Precious Blood to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, to give hope to the oppressed. Same God calls us to prayer, leading us to pray daily, to pray with each other. Can I say pray with you? To tell our stories of what God has been doing with us, something God did, God moments. Even I just told you, talking with the bishop and Father Augustine. Well, God is leading us, the same God, here and now. And we know where he's going with this. To the resurrection. Through the resurrection to the fullness of his kingdom. He leads us even now to communion, preview, where heaven and earth meet to be one with God, to share his own blessed life. This is where God is leading us. This is where God is leading us. And we are his people. And the Lord comes. He comes to rule the earth with justice.